Mhm.
All right, welcome everybody to the first episode of Hallway Fights. We are brought to you by the Banff Podcast, and my name is Jason Tondro, and I am your co-host for this series. But for this episode, I am your only host. My handsome partner in crime, Mike Lafferty, is busy slaving away in the salt mines of Kessel, and I am carrying the load here with two wonderful and well-educated and brilliant guests. So let me get straight to those. Let's Alison Walker and Walt Robillard. So we'll start with Alison.
Hi there. I'm Alison. I currently am a books curator for a bookstore chain, and I pick the comic books and sci-fi and role-playing games for those stores. But before that, I knew Jason as a grad student. So I was a professor briefly before my current gig. But I'm a big fan of comic books, especially contemporary graphic novels, but also superheroes.
We met in a Dragonlance D&D campaign.
No, man.
Well, that's not how we met. We were in grad school together. But yeah, we had our first grad class ever together.
Yeah, we did. It's true.
That's when I found out that you had an interest in like Dust Bowl literature.
Yeah, well, I'm from Bakersfield, California originally, so you got to find out where you're from, about where you're from. So yeah, I love that. Actually, is someplace could do like a Southern Bastards Dust Bowl thing. It could work really well.
Yeah, I know, you're right. Well, anyway, so Alison is really up on a lot of the contemporary comics that are coming out these days because she has to be up on it for her job. And so I asked her to watch the first few episodes of The Defenders, and I know that you're a huge. Your requirement was you would only come on the show if you could be a huge Luke Cage fangirl. And
I said all these things are true.
All these things are true. So I fully endorse this plan. So absolutely. And our hope with this show is to go back after we're done with The Defenders, go back and kind of chronologically work through the other Netflix Marvel shows. And so I would love to have you back to make little screen noises about Luke Cage when we get there.
Yes.
Okay. And then our third member for the roundtable today, Walt. Walt, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Hi, Walt Robillard, the owner of Hazard Studio. We publish some role. Excuse me, my tongue is inoperable this morning. We publish the role-playing game Supers as well as other third-party role-playing game supplements. We often work with Fainting Goat Games, which is Colorado's salsa dance champion Mike Lafferty's imprint, who he will always say that he is only the champion of the Husky Caucasian division. But I've been in and around the RPG scene for quite a bit, but professionally since 2004. So, if you look during the D20 boom, you can see my name pop in and out for art and stuff like that.
And you do a lot of your own podcasting with comics creators.
I do. I have a probably an unhealthy love of indie comics, just because right around the time that I had gotten back from Iraq with the military, Civil War had just concluded. They were going into some other storylines. DC Comics were not really flying high on my radar, but it just seemed like comics in general felt stale. It just didn't. I didn't get that sense of excitement that I once got seeing Captain America lift his shield or watching Batman slink through a shadow. But the guys on the indie scene were doing some fantastic stuff, and it just blew my mind. It first started with Image, and then really started coming to the fore with some of the stuff that has come out in the last 4 or 5 years. A big shout to Mr. Andrew Lorenz of Canada, who produces stuff through his imprint S17. Really catapulted some of my first love of indies that you could get and actually own a PDF from. And then, of course, I met my business partner, Andrew Collis, who does Zenith Comics Heroic, and he's produced issues as well. And another prolific creator, Mr. Marvin Wynn, who is a huge fan of the kind of genre fiction that produces hallway fights. So these kind of indie creators really sparked my love of comics again, and it's always my pleasure when I can get somebody to sit down and give me an hour to tell me how they got into comics, what they're doing in comics, and where they plan to go next.
And Alison, we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast started. It's kind of a golden age for comics right now. Like, there's just so much great stuff coming out.
It's truly fantastic, because I keep wanting to read the things that I hadn't before, and I'm like, I don't have the time. There's so many things. There are just so many good things coming from indies, and I love the fact that, major publishing houses now are doing comics, and they're picking up really interesting things too. So it's just, it's a fantastic time to be a comic.
So this bleeds into television and film, and we've said before elsewhere, if someone had told the 12-year-old me that I would be able to watch a television show with Iron Fist on it every week.
Right? Never.
I would never have believed them, right? Now, some people would say that I would have been better off because Iron Fist is generally panned by audiences. But Doctor Strange and Iron Fist, and there's an Inhuman show about to come out. These are not big names. These are like B-string, C-string Marvel characters.
Yeah.
Getting their own shows right now, and there's just so much superhero stuff. We could do a whole series just on the CW superhero shows,
which are so fun and have a completely different take on superheroes than the Netflix shows do, which I love.
Yeah. Okay. So we should maybe talk about that. So we picked. Mike wrote to me a couple of weeks ago and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing a show on the Defenders. Do you want to be in it?" And I was like, "We should do more than we should." Make it like a series and talk about all of them from the beginning to the end. And he came up with the name, and because it's sort of the distinctive thing about the Netflix shows. Like ever since Daredevil's first season, we all have to have the hallway fight.
Who do you like? Rate them. Who's number one? I said you have to rate them. Who's number one? Which show's the best?
Yeah. Well, you want me to pick my favorite?
That's the inevitable hallway fight that starts.
Right. Yeah, right. Okay, we get a fight over which one we like the best. A lot of folks will probably end up saying that the first season of X show, better than the first half of the season. I think the reputation for the Netflix shows has been that they kind of falter around halfway through. They kind of had this dead zone in the middle, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
True.
So the most recent show just hit, and that's The Defenders, and it's only 8 episodes long. In I think a concerted effort to avoid that dead zone in the middle, and also because you have so many stars that it's got to be expensive to make a whole series. So you do it on a budget, and that means fewer episodes. We're going to talk today about the first half, the first 4, which are basically getting the band together. Like the 4 episodes are kind of getting the team together. And what did you guys have all watched it? So what do you think? Like, who would like to go first? Walt, you want to go first?
I can, but my grandfather would roll in his grave if I didn't allow the lady to take center stage.
Oh man. Wow. All right. So I'm going to admit I watched the first 3 episodes. I had time to watch the 4th, but I watched the 2nd episode twice because it lost me. I got distracted, and my husband, who's watching them with me, and I started talking, and we turned back, and the episode was almost over. And so we were like, we need to watch this again, because I was so afraid I was going to miss something, especially with Sigourney Weaver. So that's why I've only watched the 3rd.
Well, see, that's the research instincts in you to rewatch something over again. That's
I know, and now I'm like, why did I do that? The 2nd episode was so the first 2 episodes for me. I think. I'm hoping you guys will like them more than I did. So I'm coming at this show, I'll be honest, as a pop culture fan.
Yeah.
I have not read back Luke Cage, not that Jessica Jones has a lot of back, but or Iron Fist. I come at these characters through these TV shows by and large. Yeah. And the TV shows have caused me to go back and read mostly for Jessica Jones, the stuff that's just coming out, or most recently coming, the earlier stuff from the 2000s. So anyway, I come at it maybe differently. So the first 2 episodes, I was kind of just anticipating, and every time 2 of the characters would clash, I would be so happy, and I would just be giddy. And then, it would go back and I'd be like, okay, backstory. But the 3rd episode for me was it just made my heart sing. I absolutely loved Luke Cage and Iron Fist together.
Yeah.
And I thought that their kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Untrustful distance between the 2 characters was just hilarious and lovely, and also very in character.
Did you get that scene? Is it in 3 or in 4 when Luke is like, "I know privilege when I see it"? And
oh no, wait, now I don't know. I know that they had a little moment where I kind of squealed.
There's Dojo. It's when Colleen and
oh, that's the 3rd one where Rosario Dawson says, you guys sort this out.
Yeah.
But if that's basically, he says everything I felt about Iron Fist. So
exactly. Yeah.
It made me very happy.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think that you're the wrong. You say, well, I haven't read all these comics and I'm coming from it as pop culture. I think that's the audience.
I think so too. Yeah.
The shows are made for you. And I think that you can see that because honestly, the television shows aren't particularly loyal to the comics. I mean, the fact that Jessica and Luke are not together is the biggest sign of that.
I know, which in the comics is so cool, and I just want that to happen so badly.
Oh, you do?
I just think that their relationship is really interesting. So yeah, I was looking around on Facebook, and there were a lot of people who weren't comic book fans saying, should I watch The Defenders? Do I need to watch all the other things? People that I wouldn't have expected to, be interested in this were. And I love that like gateway. It's the gateway drug effect where I'm like, yes, have more people read comics. So, I mean, anything that will get people to do that and be, interested in these characters' backstory and then go pick up a comic is like, that's what I want.
Now, there's been a lot of debate about how much comic sales really result from successful film and television. Like there's been a long history of Marvel and DC failing to sell Spider-Man comics when a new Spider-Man movie comes out, or X-Men or whatever. I know you were from what you read in your job working for this bookstore chain, are they actually pushing? Are comics numbers increasing because of the television shows? Is there actually a link there?
Well, I mean, if you look at Publishers Weekly, which is, one of the big publications for the comic book sales are up year over year.
Okay.
But what I'm seeing as a big miss is when Luke Cage had his first show on Netflix, there was no comic that came out. And there was no new Jessica Jones when Jessica Jones came out. And I feel like that's a really big miss. Yeah. Because, pop culture moves so quickly. You really do need to have the things tied together. And the same with, watching Captain America, where the comic books are like years ahead of what the movie is.
Yeah.
And so I think it's hard for those people then to go back because there's not a lot of cross promotion between the world of the show and the comic book.
Yeah. Someone goes and watches Captain America in Civil War, and then they pick up a comic and he's like evil fascist Captain America.
Right, exactly. And they're like, who is this guy?
Yeah, who is this guy? Well, what did you think about the show?
I liked the first 3 episodes. One of the things that I really always enjoy in a comic and in a comic show is when they start personalizing aspects of of the media that necessarily wouldn't have personality. Like, for example, in the Luke Cage series, we discussed it the last time on the BAMF podcast. New York is front and center as a character.
Yeah.
So you get that sense of this is what Harlem looks like. This is what Harlem feel like. Yeah. And you get that sense again in in the first couple of episodes of The Defenders. But one of the things that I really enjoyed was that they gave each character, especially in the intro. Let's talk about the intro for a second when they're doing like the titles and the whatever. The Netflix shows starting from Daredevil have always had an amazing intro, no matter the series. And this was no different. And I just loved the fact that they superimposed a lot of maps and street maps, right? How cool was that?
It was amazing.
So the character becomes embodied as the city. Right?
Yes.
Daredevil is the city. Jessica Jones is the city.
And each character gets their own signature color, which happens in the intro, but also happens through kind of like the series. If you look at when Jessica Jones walks in, everything is kind of faded and like tired. Her you see a lot of blues and
it's
so
all
forth.
That dark blue, almost purple, almost but not quite purple.
Yes,
right? If it was purple, it would be the Purple Man, and she's not. She's over the Purple Man, but she's still blue. Right?
Yes, then you got Charlie Cox's section as Daredevil. Always has that haze to it, which really points to the way his powers work. If you have this radar sense and this ability, which they don't really go into in the show, they use it as more like his hearing and his senses are turned up to an X factor. But how in a city of that many people with so many different smells, and touches, and textures, how hazy must his sense of direction really be when you have all this input coming at you at the same time? And I think they play that really well in the scenes where it's just him, where everything has this hazed overlook. I'm
kind of obsessed with the color in this show.
Yes,
because the Luke Cage yellow, the Iron Fist green, the Jessica Jones blue, and the Daredevil red it's a learning tool for watching the show. Like before you even see a character, you see that the screen is saturated yellow, and you're like, oh, okay, this is a Luke Cage scene, and it switches by color. So that and it's once I started to pay attention to the color, I couldn't stop looking at it. Like everywhere they go, everything was yellow. Like the signs are yellow. There's yellow street lights everywhere. The yellow crosswalks. Everything is like super yellow. And then it all stops and it all switches to green and we get an Iron Fist scene, And you can imagine the writers thinking, okay, we've got these 4 different storylines, each with supporting cast characters. How are we going to help the audience keep track of who is coming up next? Like what scene is this? And we do it with color. Jim's not here, but he would say at this point, he made this observation. It's like a different art team drawing each
exactly.
Pages, right? And then when they all get together at the Chinese restaurant, all of the colors are in the menu, right? So that the Dragon Rest is all green and yellow and red, and inside the restaurant is all the blue, or it's all red and green and yellow until the earthquake makes everybody realize something weird is going on, and then suddenly the screen is flashing all 4 colors from police lights.
And my favorite too is when Elektra shows up. And she's wearing that outfit that's black and red, and linking her to Daredevil. And Daredevil's the first person. Everybody thinks the fight's over, and he says, "Wait." And you have this moment where you're like, "Oh, of course, you're the one who notices Elektra." That moment for me was one of the most interesting, where their colors mirror, and she's I loved that.
Yeah. The design I found very interesting, and you're bringing up Elektra. So before I get into this, what do you guys think of Elektra? Alison, what do you think of Elektra?
Oh man, I feel honestly when I saw Elektra, I said, "Oh God, I need to rewatch Daredevil." Crap, because I haven't thought about Elektra, and I was actually incredibly surprised. So when I didn't read any spoilers, and so I watched it, very dry. And when you had the really weird alien birth scene, Sigourney Weaver, and I feel like that has to be a little on purpose. With her covered in red too, getting back to the color stuff. Yeah. In my head, I was like, is that Elektra? And I looked at my husband and I was like, do we know her? That's and I had this moment and it was, it's fascinating to me. I want to know more about Alexandra as well.
I barely recognized Elektra when we first saw her. Sigourney Weaver's character is interesting. I'm not quite sure what to make of her. I mean, we find out in the 4th episode, I believe it's in the 4th when Stick finally shows up, and he does the exposition dump that the hand was formed by 5 people, the 5 fingers of the hand, and one of those people is Alexandria. So she's sort of been the leader and one of the founders of the hand since it was first created. But she's not a comics character, at least as far as I know. She's not from the comics. And so this is another example of kind of what you were talking about. Like, I think that the writers were like, well, we need a villain. The villain needs to be the founder of the hand.
Yeah, and obviously,
yeah, and we need a performer who brings the gravitas that we want, right? So we hire Sigourney Weaver because she's Sigourney effing Weaver.
Yeah, and her outfits in the show are impeccably amazing too.
She was white, all in white for like the first couple of episodes, and then it started to get a little bit different. It started to get like green and scaly and all kinds of weird textures. Yeah,
and then there's a moment where she almost gives Elektra that white scarf she has, and anyway. The way that the set and the costumes and the colors are working, I just think is so smart.
Yeah.
Like,
Walt, impressions of Elektra. Like, what do you think about this character going in?
For the second Daredevil series, I really enjoyed the choice of actress. I think she brought a lot of presence to the role. I liked the way that she approached Elektra as like the spoiled rich kid who was given purpose, but then every once in a while has to indulge those desires of privilege. And I think that going into this, you get a sense of how strong their relationship was at one point, because even though who she was as a person is supposed to be eradicated by becoming the Black Sky, she recognizes Matt Murdock.
Yeah,
and that starts to bring who she was. And I liked the fact that because I mean, in the comics, Elektra, was portrayed as an assassin. That's who she was, and you really don't get that sense of it in the first iteration of her in Daredevil, because she was part of the chase, and as she goes now, you guys have seen the first 4 episodes. I watched
the first 4. Allison's seen 3.
Okay, I've seen the whole thing.
Okay. Go past 4. We'll have you back.
Nope.
Spoil the last half for us.
But I think as this goes through, and as you guys start to progress from middle toward going toward the 9th inning, you start to get more of that sense of who Elektra becomes, and there are some very, very clever hints to storylines that are so subtle that I almost missed them, and I'm a huge Daredevil fan. So,
so I'm like a card-carrying member of the Karen Page fan club, right? So watching the second season of Daredevil was honestly painful to me. I wanted this woman to go die in a fire. Like because she was so ruining like Matt's relationship with Karen, and I got so emotionally invested in that relationship from the first season. I mean, they did a really good job on me. They totally worked me over, And I was really invested in Matt and Karen, and then when Elektra shows up, and I'm like, no, run from her, you stupid son of a bitch. So I mean, I absolutely agree with what you guys are saying about the actress. I thought she did an amazing job, and I thought that it was well written. But I am so rooting for her to lose. I can't even tell you.
Now, while we're on that whole plane, can we just agree that the most powerful presence in all these Netflix films, right, the one that truly dominates the screen every time we see them, is Foggy Nelson?
Foggy is brilliant,
right? Isn't he like the coolest character out of all of them? You know, he's just. I think he's amazing.
Allison, Foggy Nelson.
I love Foggy. I think.
Okay.
Really...
All right. You can stay.
Yeah.
Okay. We're not going to kick you off the island. No, Foggy is great.
And I think it says volumes about Matt's character as a person and like the kind of work they've seen him do, especially when you find out in the first few episodes that he's back to doing pro bono work.
Yeah.
It shows what kind of person he is when you have wonderful people like Foggy and Karen willing to give him chance after chance after chance with this other life, you know, that he's leading. And they almost make it sound like drug addiction.
Yeah. Well, he talks about it in the second show as he kind of loves the violence of it. It's the anger and the physicality of punching people that he kind of can't quit, right? And those first two episodes that Allison, that you found kind of so boring, those are really all of the supporting character cast, right? That's where we got Claire and Colleen and Misty Knight and Foggy and even the lawyer chick. What's her name again?
I was not expecting her to come back quite.
Yeah. She's got to come back. There's got to be more for them. But they're kind of only in the first two episodes, and it's all the supporting cast members, which to some extent was probably done just because fans are going to they want to see the supporting cast. But then they all kind of fade out, and we get the next two episodes, which are all about like building the team with the hallway fight in Midland. And the Midland skyscraper building, and then the Chinese restaurant, which is all of episode 4.
Okay. Well, I'm excited for episode 4 now.
Yeah. They just kind of sit around in the Chinese restaurant the whole time, with the exception of Jessica, who of course quits, right? Because of course she quits.
Yeah, because of course she does.
Because of course she quits. The reason why I kind of brought up Elektra from the beginning is because one thing that I sort of noticed is that all of these characters have been written so that they have a strong reason to act and then a strong reason to not act, right? And each one of them kind of overcomes their reason to not act, but they do it at different times in the show, so that we as audiences kind of watch one person after another decide that acting is more important than not acting. The first guy is actually Luke. His reason to not act is because he just got out of prison. And Claire's there saying, hey, I kind of like you not in prison. What do you say we try this for a while, this not in prison thing? But he's like, well, I got to help people. And even though he doesn't know anything about all this supernatural ninja shit, he's really the easiest sell of anybody on the team. He's like, people are in trouble. I got to help them. And his motivation ends up being, look, I'm here to help one person and one family. Like he meets that kid and he meets the kid's mom, right? And the kid's involved with stuff, and the kid ends up getting arrested. And Luke is like, I'm here to save one family. You can see the writers in the writing room deciding, okay, how do we get every player character to join the team, right? And then I think Iron Fist is like the second guy, and his problem is that he feels he has to do everything alone. He's got "This is my fight" written on his character sheet, and he keeps invoking it, right? Whenever he has to get extra action points, extra hero points. But finally, he realizes he has to work in the team, and then Daredevil he's the third person to come in because he's trying to quit. He's like the addict, like you. I think Walt describes this pretty well. He's got like, no, I can't get involved in this. I can't. And Jones is actually the one who says, look, they've all seen the way you fight. They all know who the devil of Hell's Kitchen is. They're gonna figure it out. They're not stupid. You need to just come clean and roll with this, because it's really already done. It's really a matter of how do you want to handle it. And then that's shortly after that, Jessica walks out, because of course she walks out. She's like, I'm here to help my client, and whatever you guys are doing, it's not helping my client, so I'm leaving. Until she finds out that her client is involved, and she, of course, walks back, right? So it's really interesting. Over the course of 4 episodes, each of the characters kind of buys in, but they do it one after another sequentially, so that we have a 4-episode team building exercise going on behalf of the writers. I was all over the organizing structure of this show as I was watching it. I was blocking it out, outlining it on the writer's wall in my head.
I think you're right. Oh, sorry, I'm getting horrible feedback. Oh well. It really takes care of some of the issues that were present in Daredevil, where you had this lull in the middle of the series.
Yeah.
Because with this kind of like building up of this arc, you never have that moment where you're like, all right, we've fought the first bad guy, the show's over, but wait, there's another bad guy.
Yeah.
So you don't have that moment, which is for this type of show is wonderful, because it would just be sad if you had 4 or 5 episodes where you're not using these characters well.
Yeah. Like if the team had gotten together in episode 2, they'd have to reduce tension by episode 4, and there'd be this kind of well in the middle before they built back up. And we're like, no, fuck that. We don't want that. Instead, they extend the buildup, and then it's just, I think, and Walt can tell me if I'm right on this, but isn't it like the whole show kind of all takes place over just a couple of days?
Yeah, over the course of a week.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but going back to the each person in sequence finding a reason and finding not a reason, that actual insight into the characters gets played over and over again as you continue through to the full 8 episodes, and you're going to see those kind of choices keep coming back in, which is really interesting, because usually once the characters all buy in, they'll grab their swords, shields, torches, pitchforks, and go and assault the mountain or whatever it is, but in this, there's a constant idea that they have to keep making this evaluation as they go, because the situation isn't always black and white.
Yeah. There was a criticism that this is one of the problems maybe for the show, is that maybe it has been produced in some amount of haste. Maybe it was written a bit too quickly, because some of the characters seem really inconsistent. Like, let's pick on Danny for a minute, because he's kind of an easy target. Like, on the one hand, you have the scenes in the restaurant where he's kind of the happy guy. He's like stuffing wontons in his mouth and like, hey, I got to eat a lot to build up my chi. And he's making jokes and kind of talking about the group as like, hey, we should form a team. And everyone else is like, oh, that's bullshit. And then 20 minutes later, or 20 minutes previous, he's all super serious. I'm traumatized by my parents' death. And no one can decide if he's the happy-go-lucky guy who's content with who he is as Iron Fist, or if he's this kind of walking trauma factory. And he kind of waffles back and forth. And we see this with some of the other characters, although I think to a lesser degree. What do you guys think about how these characters are handled? Are they consistent?
Well, if you look at guys like Danny Rand, this is a guy who's just been thrust back into the public spotlight.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a lot of exposure to friends that aren't monks, who know everything about him. The only person he's had to deal with on a regular basis is Colleen Wing, and who is in essence a monk herself, an ascetic. So here he is now in this room full of people who now are suggesting they form a team. And do you show these perfect strangers your trauma, or do you play it off? I'm the cool billionaire. Oh,
there you go. So maybe there's a little bit of performance there on the part of Danny. Like, yeah, I can see that.
I mean, and it plays very well with Luke Cage when they're sitting in the restaurant, and he's like, "Man, how can you eat at a time like this?" And he's like, "Well, forming the fist uses a lot of energy." He's like, "I got to keep my energy up," and he stuffs another pork roll down there.
Well, see this bit, Allison. You'll see this bit when he like offers Luke the last pot sticker, and it's part of that bonding. All of us as comic fans, we all know that it's
geeking out badly.
What's that?
We were geeking out very badly.
Totally geeking out. Yeah, it was like there's such a bromance. Like we got to get there, but we have to get there. We're not there yet, but we got to get there. And I think that, like you said, Alison, there's a scene where Luke just plain reads the white privilege riot act to Danny, and that scene ends with Danny sort of acknowledging silently that Luke is right.
I thought that was really important to me too, because there was so much press about Iron Fist.
Yeah.
And so and this is one of the reasons why I like the Netflix shows, is because they learned, I feel like they take on a lot of what people say about them, which is, you know, they had the lull, and so the Defenders doesn't have that lull. Iron Fist, really, like, it was, for all four of them, probably, at least for me, the most uneven of the four shows, and, you know, the one that was met with the most kind of critical blog posts and uproar, and rightly so, I think. And so I like the fact that they nodded to that, but they're like, you know, like, what are we going to do at this point, right? You have to work with what you're given. And so as long as his character continues in an arc, I'm willing to stay along for the ride. As if he isn't the privileged, you know, white boy that just is, you know, so caught up in his own trauma that he can't help anybody, then I don't want to have anything to do with him. So I like the fact that Luke Cage called him out. I think that moment has to happen.
But you see Netflix as being fairly nimble in its ability to respond to criticisms from the popular press.
Yeah, I do. I just also, I don't know. I feel like they've been learning what works, and I mean, think about it. They're a new network too, and so they took on this project, and I'm not quite sure they had Defenders in their eye when they started. Maybe they did. But they really have, I think, taken on board a lot of, you know, what people said, and especially when people loved Jessica Jones and Daredevil, and especially Luke Cage, they were like, oh, like these things can actually be profitable and enjoyable for our audience. So yeah.
So the show's called Hallway Fights. Oh, what did you guys think of the fight choreography in the show? Like, how is the action? How is did you like the hallway fights?
I loved it. I thought it was much better than Iron Fist. Iron Fist, like, I felt the camera was constantly getting in the way of fights. And in Defenders, I felt like the camera kind of was more of a neutral character and let the fight happen. And I loved that.
Yeah. Well, you do a lot of fight choreography, so I know you're going to have an opinion.
Well, I'm not so much fight choreographed as I am an actual fighter.
Right. So, right. You're correct. Thank you for correcting.
So, because the two actually have very, very dynamic similarities and differences.
You want to tell us your qualifications here? Because I will get it wrong.
If I did, I'd have to use a lot of foreign language, and it sounds real. Like one of the systems I do is called. It sounds very good in Japanese. I mean, you sound like a man when you're saying it. You know what I mean? And then, but it's actually the new method of the Willow Hart School of Soft Science.
Wow! But it sounds much more macho in Japanese.
Oh yeah! Oh, very very macho. So, but I've been studying martial arts since I was 8. I'm 45 now. And I've continued through various forms, cultures, even including modern martial arts, such as the Modern Army Combative System, right, and the Marine martial arts program.
So what do you think of? So what did you think of Defenders?
To quote, to go back to Alison, Alison was very right in saying that not only the camera but the show of Iron Fist got in its own way. They tried to have the actor play a kung fu expert who had been trained from an early age to move in a certain way. And the times that they did use a stunt double was good, but they didn't use him enough. They tried to get the actor to do that because at the time that this was, that Iron Fist came out, John Wick had just dropped. Yes. Not a year before. And everybody was so impressed with Keanu Reeves, who, prior to the film, spent a year training, and that's all he did.
Well, Reeves has a long history of training for martial arts movies. I mean, the Matrix films alone make him, Tai
Chi Master, stuff like that. So I think Defenders takes some of that back because the Daredevil fight choreography was brutal and it was acrobatic, which is he's supposed to be in the comics. And it combined those two things very, very well. And I think Luke Cage wasn't isn't a martial artist. He's more like a boxer and a competitive fighter. So he has that raw talent that mixes with his strength very, very well. Jessica Jones, same thing. She's superhumanly strong, and she uses that to her advantage.
Now I have to say, one of the funniest bits in this show so far, because I was laughing out, was when Danny is trying to punch Luke, like just punching and kicking and doing like all of these fancy moves, and that was pretty hilarious.
You know, and that goes back to the same thing as back to Iron Fist, and it's one of the troubles where you have fight choreographers that might be looking at comics, but not necessarily looking at what those comics are supposed to portray. We actually did on the Banff podcast, Chuck Rice and a couple of other guys got together with me, and we discussed martial arts and comics and how they are very lackluster, because 99% of the time, the artists who are depicting this level of choreographed violence don't understand what they're supposed to look like or move like, or even understand why they do certain things.
I remember a lot of this, when this happens in comics, it can often be really attached to a particular artist. Like I remember, this is not martial arts, but it's kind of a similar thing. When Larry Hama came on to draw Punisher, and Hama was a vet and he knew these guns like nobody else. And so suddenly every time the Punisher picked up a pistol, it wasn't just a generic pistol. It was a particular model of a particular gun, and Hama knew exactly what kind of gun it was. And the unique characteristics of that equipment became plot points in the story. And I remember reading Denny O'Neil's Question, a DC comic, and I think Dennis Cohen was the artist on that book. This is back, I'm dating myself now. I think this is like early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And Cohen was a practicing martial artist, and I remember showing it to a friend of mine who did karate. He's like, wow, he's actually balanced. Like that pose is actually a real martial arts pose. And a lot of times us ignorant readers, we don't get it. There's an authenticity to the book, but we're so conditioned by cinema to think what martial arts is supposed to look like because we've watched John Wick or whatever. We don't really realize the difference between good martial arts and cinematic martial arts. You know?
Right. And the thing about cinema, when you bring martial arts to the cinema, is you want the audience to see what they're doing. But at the same time, you don't want to slow it down or open it up so much that you're actually losing the effectiveness. And that's where you get like people who will study a scene and look at somebody getting kicked in the face and like, oh, they were way too far away on that and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, the Defenders did a much better job of portraying a lot of different fighting in the actual show. And you can see that they've gone back and answer, like Alison was saying, an answer to the fans saying, hey, this sucked or this was great. They started incorporating that, and you're seeing a lot of better stuff.
And the actor who plays Danny is doing a better job with the kung fu.
Better, but they're doing a lot more cutaways to a stunt double and superimposing his face digitally. Which you're going to need because, like for example, the thing that you loved, the Luke Cage fight. So somebody who's trained in the martial arts that he's supposed to be trained in, one of those martial arts is called Shuaijiao. It's a type of Chinese wrestling. And
hold on, Walt.
Yeah.
We just got warning that Allison's computer is about to die. So I want to hold on and make sure that she has a chance to say any sort of final or parting thoughts about the show.
Absolutely.
No parting thoughts, just an apology that I'm doing this in my car because my house is under construction.
Well, we're going to have you back, okay? If you'd like to come back, we would really like to have you back.
I would, and I promise I will be in a normal office with a plug and not my car. I go where I'm needed when I'm needed. So
well, we're lucky to have you, everybody. So thank you, Alison Walker, everyone. And we'll have her back when we get to Luke Cage, and sooner if we can. Thank you for your help, and good luck in there.
Bye.
Cheers.
So, Walt, carry on. You were talking about a particular martial arts style.
So this Chinese wrestling, they do a lot of off balancing, and I think that Danny would have off-balanced Luke, caused him to move or step in a certain way, and then taking advantage of that lack of structure to push him down. Because I don't know about you, but I know that when I do a particular movement at somebody, when I'm approaching somebody and entering their personal space in a way that is most uncomfortable for them,
right?
If I throw two techniques and neither one work, my next thing is going to be to circle around to a point where it's going to force you to turn. That's going to give me a half breath to see what your movement is like. Because if the first two things I did nothing, I have to change my game.
Yeah.
You know,
I honestly think that whole scene was really just there for all the people that thought Iron Fist sucks. It was there so that all those people could laugh and say, see, I told you Iron Fist sucks. But then all the people that like Iron Fist wait for the punch, right? Because we know the punch is good. There's only one way that scene can end, with Iron Fist punching him and ending the scene. So I thought it was a kind of a comedic recognition of the critiques of the show, while at the same time kind of saying, but we want to do better. We want to do better, and give us a chance, and we'll win you over.
And I am so waiting for him to get to the stage of like Living Weapon, the comics Living Weapon, where he is just a wrecking ball, a human wrecking ball.
I had not read a lot of those, the Immortal Iron Fist, and a lot of the Brubaker. I think it was Brubaker, wasn't it? I had not read a lot of Brubaker's Iron Fist work, and so after I watched the first series, the Iron Fist series, I went back and I read a lot of it again, and there is so much good shit in there. Like there is just the whole kind of fantastic kung fu action stuff, along with the amazingness of it, like just the sheer bananas factor of all the crazy stuff that's going on. And it didn't hurt that they brought in Amazing Man, that they have a character, the Prince of Orphans, who is Marvel's riff on the public domain character Amazing Man,
right?
Who I also riffed on when I made Amazing Woman for the Supervillain Handbook.
On sale now from
on sale now. I mean, I blatantly stole the Jaw Snapper and Twilight straight out of Brubaker's book and made it a stunt for Amazing Woman. You know, so when I read that book, and I was like, man, I just wish so much good stuff. But then I think a lot of the writers that came along later and took over Iron Fist after Brubaker left, I think they kind of squandered a lot of that stuff, frankly. I think a lot of the original and really creative ideas Brubaker had going were kind of wasted, either ignored or outright deconstructed.
Now, are you reading his new title?
Is this the one with the Iron Fists with the
with the little kid?
I haven't read it yet. I mean, I'm really eager to read it, but I haven't read it.
The art style's fun. It's like very cartoony. It's fun.
Yeah, well, that's good. See, and that's part of what Alison was talking about, the fact that a lot of these comics publishers are starting to get onto the idea. This is in contrast to when you were coming back and you were talking about Civil War, and all these characters were kind of so routine, boring, and kind of alienated from you, and you didn't want to read them, and you might still not. But I think what we're seeing from people like Marvel and DC is an attempt to find an audience that does want to read, and a lot of those audiences are kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
We get books like Iron Fists, or we get the Ms. Marvel book, which is directed very much at teenage girls.
Super Sons.
Oh, great choice. Yes, great example. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, cool. I got to turn in my Marvel fan card, I guess, because a lot of DC lately.
Well, anyway, so what did we miss? We didn't really talk about Alexandria much. But I know you've seen to the end, and I don't want to ask you any questions because you'll.
What did you think of? I can't remember what episode he shows up in. What did you think of Kamakuri, the second finger of the hand, the Japanese guy?
Well, okay, so
he only speaks in Japanese.
I've only seen him in one scene.
All right. Yeah.
I haven't seen him fight. He shows up when he's butchering a bear.
Yes, an endangered animal.
And he's taking this bear apart, and with the punchline is you don't like to get your hands dirty, he says, as he's taking his bloody hands out of this corpse. Obviously being set up as somebody who's really scary. the fourth episode ends with Elektra facing off against all four of them in this kind of cheesy superhero lineup move. I wanted to hear like an anime theme, but and I don't know really what's up with Sigourney Weaver. We saw her do a couple of moves on Elektra when Elektra comes out of the birthing chamber, but it's really hard, I think, for me personally, for me to take Sigourney Weaver serious as a physical threat. But I mean, not because she's not a kick-ass, but it's just she's an old woman now, and that sounds really terrible. But they did it with Gao. They had the same problem with Gao, the little short Chinese woman who they totally sold me on making her a scary threat. So if they did it with Gao, they can do it with Sigourney Weaver.
Absolutely.
Got all that additional gravitas to bring. So,
now, what did you think of some of the criticism? And I know I saw it first on your Face Space feed,
yes,
where you were talking about how they were coming together like a 4th edition D&D party.
Well, yeah. So this is sort of my Facebook joke that the Defenders is one tank, one DPS, one controller, and one player who says, "I'm a role player. My character has a dysfunctional build on purpose." So those, of course, being Luke Cage as the tank, Iron Fist, who's got one job, and that's punching you with his magic fist. And I call Daredevil a controller. Now, this seems like a weird description for a character like this, who's basically a martial artist. But he's but in the sense of a street level low tech game with low levels of powers, Daredevil's signature move is, and I was very gratified to see him do it in his very first fight scene in the series, is to turn off the lights and make you fight him in the dark, right? So the first thing he does when he finally jumps into action after the earthquake is he throws like a gun or something to knock out the lights and fight the punks in the street. If you turn out the lights and make people fight you in the dark so that you can fight them better, that's a classic controller move. That is to say, you're a character who triumphs not by fighting all the guys at once, but by fighting them a little bit at a time in a situation that's to your advantage, right? Now, the high power version of this is mind controlling someone or entangling them or putting them in illusions or whatever so that you only have to fight 2 of them instead of all 4. But Daredevil is constantly disarming people, tripping them up with his billy clubs, or turning out the lights and stuff. So he was my controller. And then that leaves Jessica Jones, whose player is like, fuck it, I don't need a build. I'm going to be strong and tough, and then I'm just going to be a functioning alcoholic. Which just backs up something that I've long believed about superhero stories, and that is that your powers are almost completely irrelevant. A lot of characters, a lot of players, when they make a superhero, they can't buy into this. They're like, no, I gotta have a unique superpower that nobody else has ever had, and I've got to be, this kind of unique snowflake. And I'm like, all of the most interesting characters out there have the most boring superpowers, but they're all interesting up here, right? They have these competing conflicts, they have tensions, they have drives that they're both eager to and afraid to engage, and that's what makes good character is personality.
Look at Hickman's run on Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four are some of the most vanilla superheroes power-wise, but Hickman's run, holy crap! Yeah, and Hickman's a great example because he'll take these characters and he'll give them this incredibly imaginative plot. Like the Fantastic Four is all about, they're about being fantastic. That is to say that you have to be amazed every time you read a Fantastic Four book with the incredible and the imagination at play. And this is where Hickman, I think, was really strong. He really understood that the Fantastic Four were about imagination and creativity and that kind of wild ideas. Even though the characters themselves, their powers,
or just about, like you said, just about as vanilla as you can get. Like you got a guy who turns on fire. That's not exactly not exactly something to write home about, as far as creativity goes.
And I think that's what the Defenders does really well with these characters, because if you take away their powers, these characters are all people with varying levels of guilt. And how do I deal with the guilt and still come out the other side a good person?
There's a very strong impulse in superhero narratives today, at least on the big screen and on television and film, to make non-heroes, to make characters who insist they are not heroes. In fact, it's gotten so bad that if a character actually says, I want to be a hero, we actually look down on him for that, and we don't take him seriously. And the show lampoons that when Patsy is talking to Jessica. It's like, you're an actual, and she's like, don't say it. I'm not even listening. And Patsy says, you're an actual superhero now. Like, and Matt, I think at one point even says, I never asked for that title. I didn't ask to be called that. And, oh no, it's Luke. It's Luke says, I didn't ask to be called a hero. And Claire's like, well, too bad. I actually kind of wish that superhero shows were not as hung up on that, because I think it becomes a very predictable beat. There's a moment where somebody says, you're a hero, and then the hero has to say, no, I'm no hero. And then unless he does that, he's somehow not a hero. Like, in order to be a hero, you have to say you're not one. And it's just gotten kind of predictable. That's all. It's not badly written. In fact, often it's written quite well, or even funny. But it's a little bit too predictable to me.
I was actually at a restaurant some time ago, and somebody had walked up to a soldier who had just gotten back from deployment.
Yeah.
And I was just grabbing lunch real quick, and obviously they had just gotten done with the airport, and they were just grabbing some food real quick that wasn't airport food. And this kid looks at the soldier and says, are you a hero? And he's like, my uncle was a superhero. And he's like, and talking about like how her uncle was a soldier and stuff, and how she saw him as a hero. And the guy had the best line. He had to be no older than 22, 23, but the wisdom that this kid dropped was amazing. He says, I can't control the way people see me. I can only control the way I see myself. And he's like, and I see myself saying, thank you, sweetie. I really appreciate that. This came from a 22-year-old kid. And I'm just like, wow, man, rock that. That was fantastic.
Nice. Yeah, good. All right. Well, listen, on that note, why don't we wrap up for today? Everybody, I'm Jason Tondro. I'm one of your hosts for Hallway Fights. My colleague here today was Walt Robillard, and a frequent podcaster on Banff and with his own podcast as well. We were also joined by Alison Walker, who...
Any relation to Patsy?
They are related only in their shared coolness factor.
Right on.
Yeah. And this has all been brought to you by the Banff Podcast. And if you like what we do here, we have constant guests, and we talk a lot about comics, superhero film, and gaming on the Banff Podcast. So give us a listen there. And we will have more episodes coming for you. Our next episode, we will finish off our conversation about Defenders. We had a couple other guests on here, some folks that you haven't met yet. And then we'll start our retrospective and go back and start at the beginning at Daredevil Season 1. All right. Thanks, everybody. Signing out.
Cheers.
All right. Thanks, Walt.
Yeah, no worries. Are you able to cut the video, or do you need somebody to do it?
I was not going to do it. I was going to let Mike do it. But if you would like to volunteer, I will certainly not.
Do you know how to download the MP4?
Well, I can click a button. Yeah.
Yeah. Just go to the if you go to the your creator studio, it's one of the options to edit. Just download the MP4.
I think since Mike didn't join us, I'm going to make him do it.
Okay.
As a punishment. But if he doesn't want to, I can do it. And if I have any problems, I'll ask you for some advice.
Right on. And then just send me the video, and then I can cut it for you.
Unfortunately, we can't do it with the Arthur Lives because YouTube pulled it. It cannot be downloaded.
What I can do for you though is I was thinking about this the other day. I totally forgot to get with you about it. Just life's been weird.
Yeah.
what I can do, if you want to put it back on YouTube, is I can take the audio, cut it where we need to cut it, and then put a series of graphics up.
Yeah.
And then you can get it right back up on YouTube, and people can find it that way.
Yeah, that would be an idea. Right now, we do have that audio because Mike posted the audio on the Fading Goat channel or on the Banff channel, and that's right now. That's all that survived. So yeah, that would be cool. And I have a few graphics. I have like the map. So when they're running around the ship, for example, in the adventure, we could use that, and a few other things. But no, that'd be a great idea if you could. That would be awesome. Of course, the book will be out in probably December. So Kara has started layout.
Oh, awesome!
Yeah. All right, I'm going to let you go. Go feed my dogs.
Thank you, sir.
Good luck.